Hello and welcome to The Long Couch. My name's Carl. I'm joined tonight by Mel.
I'm not in charge anymore. The execs and producers upstairs, they took a leap of faith, and they let me in charge for a single episode, and they said never again. So I'm back.
And on tonight's episode, we will be discussing bad arguments, aka logical fallacies.
Hell yeah.
So what is or what are logical fallacies?
It's what YouTube Shorts commenters use.
That's the language of most people on the internet or maybe the political debate sphere. So, logical fallacies are errors in reasoning or flaws in argumentation that can weaken the validity or soundness of an argument. They are commonly used in debates, discussions, and persuasive writing, often unintentionally, to manipulate or mislead the audience. Understanding logical fallacies is important for critical thinking and effective communication because they can lead to faulty conclusions or invalid arguments. So what we're going to do on this episode is begin with a mock debate. So I'm going to present a topic. Mel, you will go first, and you will give me up to 90 seconds of your argument.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I will have about the same length response, and I will try to use a certain logical fallacy against you, and then you will try to guess which one it is, and we'll go on to discuss it.
You know, it's interesting because a lot of podcasts are sort of centered around, debates.
Mm-hmm.
You ever seen the clips of like the fake podcasts that aren't even actual podcasts where it's just
I'm so worried that people think that we're a fake podcast.
Dude, but you know what? You can find our stuff though. You'll like watch a video of a guy like defending himself against like 10 girls that he's paid to be on his podcast.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, where's the full episode? There's no full episode.
No.
So we'll be kind of like that, so we'll be like a debate-oriented podcast, except like every conversation is purposely in bad faith, and that's the format.
We're a real podcast doing fake debates.
Yes, yeah, it's the instead of real debates happening on fake podcasts, we're a real podcast and we're doing fake. You know what? I think you're onto something here, Carl.
That could be our slogan.
What part of that is our slogan? Real podcast, fake debates?
Yeah.
But I appreciate your respect for the spirit of debate.
I'm worried that if I make a certain argument that I don't actually believe here, it's going to be taken out of context, just like we so often are.
Listen, dude, I'm taken out of context every time, I think.
Did you see the response on Instagram to your Sokka Netflix adaptation?
Dude, I didn't know that's how you... Listen, I actually admitted on that podcast that I was probably pronouncing his name wrong.
It's not even that, though. Everybody... There's so many comments on there about people just taking you at face value.
Yeah. Well, yeah, dude. Yeah, what the fuck was that? I was obviously joking. I was obviously like, you know what I would do if I was in charge of Netflix? I would make the show bad. And people were like, I can't believe you say that.
Right.
They're like, I can't believe you would purposely make the show bad. That's why you're not in charge. And it's like, what are you talking about?
Because you said being sexist is problematic and cringe, and we should not have that. But apparently people actually do talk like that, and so that's not a dog whistle for I'm being sarcastic.
I thought we were all in on the joke.
Uh-huh.
I thought we were all kind of in this together, laughing at the show.
I think that I need to like color code the subtitles when you're being sarcastic.
You know what, dude? Before every short form video you post of our podcast, just put a giant blaring alarm with the text, "This is a joke." And listen, I don't like being one of those guys. I don't like being one of those guys that it's like nobody can take a joke anymore. But I'm not saying that about offensive things. I actually just don't think they got that it was a joke.
Right. Every short will just begin with, "This is an out of context 60-second clip. Go watch the full episode."
This is a 30-second clip from an hour-and-a-half podcast. So obviously it embodies every opinion shared in that time period.
That's right. Okay. let's get into the real meat of this episode, though.
Hell yeah.
So our first...
Speaking of,
Yes.
real quick, one of the highlights of my life was when I was like, oh, here's an opinion, and some of the comments was like, Cat Ears is right about that. And I was like, dude, I feel so vindicated. Like somebody, endearingly referred to me as Cat Ears, not the typical mean comments that I get about them. And they were like, yeah, because everyone disagrees with me. So it was very nice. It was heartwarming.
Well, let's hope that we can see more of that in the future.
Doubtful. What's our first logical fallacy?
Well, I won't tell you the fallacy, but I will tell you the debate topic.
Yeah, okay.
So, you get to go first. We're going to discuss same-sex marriage.
Okay.
So, Mel, if you want to present a short, either in favor or against same-sex marriage, it doesn't matter which one you choose because I'm just going to fallicize the hell out of you.
Yeah, you're just going to make the most bad faith argument of all time.
Uh-huh.
Okay, here's my argument for same-sex marriage. I do not believe that any government, federal, state, or local level should, one, be able to have such litigation over one's personal life. I do not believe that there should be any sort of discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender when it comes to the legality of marriage and relationships. I think that is morally incorrect to discriminate on the pretense of sex, and I do not believe that the government should have a say in that in the first place. Let people love, kiss, hug, suck, fuck whoever they want, because that's the way of the world, is my argument.
Well, allow me to respond with a measured and well thought out argument.
Surely this will be in good faith.
Right. So, I love gay people just fine. No hate here. My concern is just that if we allow same-sex marriage, gay marriage, then that might be okay for a while. But what happens 10 years later when suddenly people want to start marrying kids? Or maybe people want to marry inanimate objects? Or it might lead to people wanting to marry animals, and then the whole concept of marriage is ruined. And nobody believes in the premise of marriage anymore. All heterosexual marriages with humans fall apart. Society crumbles.
That's slippery slope. Shit, what is that? Is that a straw man? Because isn't a straw man where it's just like taking.
Well, you actually already said it.
Oh, that's what it's called?
That is yes, the slippery slope fallacy.
Yeah, okay, cool. I didn't know that was the name of it. I see those posts all the time. Like I see that specific thing all the time of how weird alt-right grown men like play dolls with Wojaks. Though like I'll see that slippery slope graph posted where it's just a bunch of fucking Wojaks that are like, look, if we let gay people get married, people are gonna marry dogs, and it's just like, what are you talking about?
That's just the one that this topic is the first one that came to my mind when it came to slippery slope arguments.
See, I see a lot of dumb people argue that a lot.
Because they see it as this is the first step in the moral degradation of society.
Yeah, dude, the Western civilization has fallen.
Right. And everything bad that's happened since, it's all because of that step that we took.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, dude, they got rid of the Choco Taco because they legalized gay marriage 10 years ago.
Well, I was an ally before, but I don't think I can live like this.
This is so off topic, but when I woke up on that day, I remember where I was the day that the Choco Taco was discontinued.
Mm.
I mean, it was like losing a loved one.
You going to tell your grandkids about that someday?
I will, and they're not going to believe me either. They're going to say, Papa, such a wondrous and heavenly thing, there's no way that such a thing could exist upon this mortal realm surrounded by the ills of society. And I'm going to say, oh, one day it did. It did at one point. Things were better then. But that darn slippery slope.
Okay, so the slippery slope argument is a conclusion based on the premise that if A happens, then eventually, through a series of small steps, B, C, X, Y, Z will happen. Basically equating A and Z.
I don't know. It's not based on anything. You're saying, hey, we should let any consenting adult marry whichever consenting adult they damn well please. And I feel like with the slippery slope stuff, a lot of the time you're just making a whole other argument. They're like, oh, so that's going to lead to kids getting, that's going to lead to kids getting married to adults. And it's like, well, first of all, in a lot of southern states, that already happens. But also, like, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking? Like, how you're conflating two unrelated things.
Well, here's another one.
Okay.
Opening safe injection sites will lead to a catastrophic increase in drug abuse in the neighborhood. More drug abuse inevitably leads to more crime, especially violent crime. The neighborhood will be overrun with criminals and fall apart at the seams.
I've also seen this argument before. But, I mean, like, statistically, like, centers where you can, safely get needles and stuff like that, like, I think has, like, proven to, like, actually cut down drug-related crimes.
Well, people who make slippery slope arguments are not concerned with statistics.
No, they're not concerned with reality.
Because in a lot of cases, they're just totally speculating. And they're saying, we can't do this one kind of questionable thing because it's going to lead to the end of the world.
Yeah, dude, I bet that I could connect any two things through a slippery slope.
Yeah, very likely you could.
Yeah, I actually cannot believe that I accidentally got that one right. I'm very impressed with myself.
So, our debate for this fallacy will be prayer in public school. You can argue for or against. You got 90 seconds. Go.
Oh, okay. Prayer should definitely not be in public school because, honestly, if you want to be like, oh, well, this and this and this and this, because of, a lot of the time people like to cite, like, governmental documents. So, we'll cite the fact that the, First Amendment grants a freedom of religion, and enforcing prayer that pertains to a certain dogma or religion in public schooling, it sort of breaks that freedom of religion because you're encroaching upon one's religious rights by making them subscribe to the practices and agenda of a single religion. And in a public school, a school that is funded by the taxpayers, then you should not be able to make people adhere to the conventions of a religion that they don't practice. If you put, let's say, public prayer, if you put prayer in the Christian Abrahamic God in public school, then I think that you need to open up the floor for any religion to be practiced in public school. But if you're just doing one, that's encroaching on my freedoms, baby. And if there's one thing that I love about this country, it's the God-given freedoms and rights granted upon me by the Constitution of the United States of America. So yeah, don't put prayer in schools. It's bad. It encroaches on your freedoms. Very
well said, Mel.
Thank you.
You really laid out some good points there.
I feel like the other shoe's about to drop here. You're complimenting me too much.
Allow me to counter your points.
Please do.
So, of course, Mel doesn't want prayer in school because he's a demon. And also, did I mention that Mel is really ugly and God hates him? I mean, obviously, if he had to come out looking like that, obviously God hated him from the start if he made him look the way that he does. And I heard that Mel cheated on his first girlfriend and broke her heart, and, he's a real piece of shit. And I really don't think that anything that Mel says should be taken seriously.
You said you're ugly and God hates you.
Well, yeah.
It's one of the nicest things you've ever said to me, Carl. So I think I have a pretty good idea of which one this is. I'm gonna say ad hominem.
That's correct. So, ad hominem, that's when you attack the character of some person rather than their argument.
Yes.
And if we want to look to an example of that, my example here is just a picture of Donald Trump. Both because Donald Trump is like the master of ad hominem.
Yeah.
And also, everybody who criticizes him is also like very ad hominem against him.
I would actually say, and listen, this is not a novel idea or a novel thought here. But this is like by far the most like frequently used one, like easily. Like somebody makes a argument that you don't agree with, insult him. That's like you learned that as a child.
I mean, most things that Donald Trump knows, he learned as a child and never grew past.
This is true. But I mean, like, come on, like ad hominem, like everyone does that shit. Children, it's children on the playground are like,
It's
hey,
people on the internet.
yeah, people
Or
on the internet all the time. You make a well argued point, and someone on the internet is like, you're ugly, and God hates you.
yeah. A lot of times it's fully grown adults on the debate stage too.
I think it's probably the product of people, I don't know, not knowing how to, one, I guess, regulate emotions, but two, it's just so easy. Oh, somebody has proven me wrong. All right. What can be done about this? Oh, I know. I'll insult their character. I'll insult their appearance. And now nobody's focusing on the fact that I'm wrong, and they're focusing on how big that guy's head is.
Right. Yeah, we all saw Donald Trump on the debate stage absolutely roasting everybody. Totally diverting all the attention away from the actual substance and arguments and just putting people down. And then when people want to say, why do I hate Trump? Well, he's a loudmouth, orange motherfucker. He's a big bully, and he's a stupid dummy head. So it goes around.
And the thing is there's much harsher criticisms to make. Like, look, I don't give a shit that he's orange. You know what I mean? I don't get, let's get into the meat of things here. I will say though, whenever, I've seen the Trump debates, I was familiar with the former president of our country. And I think my favorite thing that he does when insulting people, like on the debate stage, is when he sticks his finger up, like, like a TikTok kid where they go, and they stick their finger up. And then he kind of like puckers his lips out like a fish. He makes like an O, like he's blowing rings out of a vape.
Right.
That's like my favorite face he makes. It is so appealing to me for some reason. I'm like, that is the stupid face you should make when you're insulting somebody.
That's the technique that won him the election.
It's so like brazenly like cocky. I think pointing your finger at anybody is like, that's like a dominant move. But I mean, doing that shit, man, it's like he believes that shit.
Let's get off Trump. We could get stuck on this.
Oh yeah, we could talk about him forever.
Let's move on to our next debate. This one. Public libraries should receive more or less government funding.
Okay.
Take it away, Mel.
I think that public libraries should receive more and consistent funding. Honestly, just because me personally, I think there's a lot of value in like community centers, and libraries are places. A library card doesn't cost anything, and so libraries are a place where a lot of people have free access to resources and information that they might not otherwise find somewhere, whether at home or like an institution like school or whatever. So you have access to books, whether it be fictional or non-fictional. A lot of the time you have access to like computers and like community resources as well. Because libraries are more than just books at this point. And so I think it's important to fund these kind of centers, not because they turn a profit, but because they are essential in building and uplifting a community. That is my argument.
Well said.
Thank you.
Well, it's all well and good that public libraries need more money and so on, but let's try to focus on what's really important here, and that is that the police department needs more money. Law enforcement, that's where that funding should be going, because crime rates are up. We've all seen it. We're all scared to leave our houses at night, and it shouldn't have to be that way. We need more law enforcement. We need more street lights. We need our people to feel safe. I don't want women out there at night feeling unsafe because the police are underfunded. So instead of putting that money into the libraries, let's put it where it's really needed, into law enforcement. If you don't know what it's called, can you tell me what I just did?
Well, you kind of like, you essentially, like, it's a redirection. It's like two unrelated things.
So how about when you're watching a movie and they set up like a character that you really suspect is the bad guy, but then it turns out, well, he was just kind of there to just distract you.
Oh, like a red herring?
Like a red herring.
Oh, is that what it's called?
That's what this one's specifically called, yes. Nice! I try to take the focus away from the actual argument at hand, and I try to divert everyone's attention onto a different argument.
Yeah, you had to spoon feed the answer to me, but I got it.
Well, I don't expect you to. That's why I initially wanted to just present these, because I don't expect you just to
I
know every logical fallacy by
I
heart.
like this format though. I like this.
You chose it, so
I
yeah.
just like debating.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's true. I did.
So another example of a red herring fallacy is a police officer pulls you over for speeding, and you say, well, there's so much other crime out there. Why are you pulling me over? You should be putting your attention somewhere else. Like, this is not serious. Don't make me pay this ticket because there's people out there killing people.
That's what I should have told that guy today. I should have said, there's so many cars everywhere. Why'd you have to hit mine? That's what I should have told him.
You should have hit a red car instead of mine.
Yeah, I should have laid a red herring fallacy on him. Maybe I wouldn't have gotten in a car wreck then. This one I see used a lot too. Because it's just like whataboutism. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think that this problem is important. Well, what about this one? They can coexist. Problems are allowed to exist at the same time, and we can care about both of them.
I feel like you most often see this on the debate stage, or if a politician or somebody, an author, is on a news show and somebody asks you a really direct question. Like, there's no way the guy's going to answer a direct question with a direct answer. He's going to try to divert the question elsewhere and say something good, or just not answer the question, just kind of soft shoe around it or something.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, this is not quite like that, but Ludwig recently posted a video where he did a bit of like a comedians in cars getting coffee bit with the new CEO of YouTube. And you know, obviously being the CEO of YouTube, it's probably a very I mean, I'm sure you probably feel like you're walking on eggshells all the time. You know, you're the head of one of the biggest companies in the world, and you know, every single decision you make and every statement you make, you know, carries weight. And so Ludwig would ask him a very direct question, and he would kind of have to sort of redirect it to like maybe like something he already predetermined in his head would be an okay thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't blame him. Like, that's how a lot of interviews go anyways. But like Ludwig would ask him like, hey, you know, how do you feel about the poor performance of this specific feature? And he would kind of be like, well, and then he would sort of redirect it to,
well, this
like,
feature is doing really well.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And so, like I said, I can't blame him, but I recently watched that video, and that's kind of like what he did for a lot of the interview.
My mind goes to Todd Howard when they asked him, why is Starfield so poorly optimized? And he was basically just like, well, you know, actually it is optimized. This is a next-gen game, and, you know, you may have to get a new computer to run it properly, but there's a lot of great technology behind this game, and, you know, we put a lot of time and energy and work into it, so it is optimized. And that was just like a total avoided the question, didn't even try to acknowledge that the game was fucked up. And these people are coached like this. Like, they say, they either try to make these questions not come up at all, or they'll say, if this comes up, here's how you're going to divert it. Like, you can't answer the question directly, and you can't appear like you don't have an answer.
There is a lot of PR training for just like subverting questions.
Right.
I feel like
it's a powerful skill to have.
Yeah, I mean, there's always that. First of all, yes, it is. But there's, you know, like you had like a convention and like you have like a panel, right? And it's like, okay, well, now it's time to take audience questions. I'm sure audience questions is the most nerve-wracking part of any panel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's like anybody could say anything, and you're like in a setting where you can't exactly like you have to say something.
Right, everyone's watching.
Yeah, I mean, you're on a panel, let's say for like a board of directors for a company, or maybe you're at a comic convention and you're like a cast member or a writer on a show, and somebody stands up with the microphone and is like, hey, how do you feel about this very fresh and new controversy that your company has that you have nothing to do with yourself? That's a crazy position to put somebody in.
No comment. What exactly made you give the worst performance of your life in this movie? Well, you know, I think I did pretty well. I played off the other actors quite well, and there's a lot of great performances in this movie, and the director, he did an amazing job, and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and listen, like I said, like I understand, but also, I see a lot of people making such bad fucking faith arguments with this exact fallacy. Like, somebody will be like, hey man, this thing, you know, hey, this person needs help. This person's in quite a compromising situation financially, and boy, do they need our community to rally together to help them out. And then somebody's always in the comments like, well, what about this person?
Yeah.
What about me?
Some other people have it worse. Well, let's hop into our next debate.
Let's do it.
The topic for this one is billionaires should pay more or less taxes.
I believe that billionaires should pay more taxes. Listen, there's a lot of sort of like economic trend stuff, like in terms of like how that shit works. I don't quite understand myself. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on tax brackets and like and shit like that, because I'm not. However, I do know that the billionaires in this country make an ungodly amount of money, like more money than somebody should know what to do with. And yes, could you argue that in a proper capitalistic society that money was earned of, their own efforts, and so therefore, why should they have to pay more when they were just more successful? No, I mean, I do think they should pay more because that money, one, it's just a lot of money, and two, that could be very beneficially redistributed through taxes, honestly, to really no big consequence or effect to the billionaire. I mean, you tax let's say somebody's making, I don't know, just whatever, $1 billion a year, because whatever, let's just get a nice even number. I don't know what the actual number is, but let's say you're taxing this person at just, let's say 50% a year, 60% a year. I mean, we're still talking $500 million a year to do whatever you want with. And also, I think that taxing billionaires more could just, like I said, be really beneficial to the society as a whole.
So basically, you're a communist.
That's, what? That's exactly what I just said.
I believe that if Mel had his way, he would tear down capitalism. He doesn't want anybody to have money. He hates when other people are successful. He thinks that everybody should just be taxed by the government. The government should have all our money. We should have no freedom to spend or have our own money or make our own purchasing decisions, and we should all just live under the thumb of the socialist government.
You know what, Carl? That feels like a pretty hasty generalization that you're making about me.
I would say that it's more of a straw man.
Fuck! No! God damn it. So I was so confident, too.
The straw man fallacy is where someone distorts or misrepresents an opponent's argument or position in order to make it easier to attack or refute.
Oh, yeah, I think this. So that means you think this? Oh, yeah. Fuck, you're right.
I just jumped to a totally illogical conclusion, not based on what you said at all, and then I attacked that argument rather than the one that you actually made.
That is also, God, I mean, all of these, you're explaining all of these to me, and I knew what a straw man was, but you're explaining all of these to me, and I'm just thinking about how often I see them on a daily basis.
Right.
And it makes me sad.
And so many people just don't even know that they're doing these.
Oh, but the thing is a lot of people do, right? Like for example, like straw manning, like a lot of the time, like it really is just made in bad faith. It's like, I think this thing, and somebody's like, oh, so you're this, so you think this because you think this, so you're this. And it's just that's once again, it's just it's so counterproductive to any sort of actual meaningful discourse. And listen, I'm not going to Twitter for meaningful discourse. Let's, be honest here. I'm not going to r/political compass memes for some meaningful discourse. But also it's just, I just think a lot of arguments on the internet, and honestly, a lot of arguments, in person too. Let's not pretend that this is exclusive to the internet space. It's just a lot of people just making shit up.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, really, that is the basis of a lot of arguments.
It's easier to just make up a worse argument for your opponent than to actually address their real argument.
Yeah, and maybe it's out of ignorance towards what you're arguing about. Maybe it's a bad faith, intentionally misconstrued argument. But sometimes I'll hear people argue their points about something that I disagree with, and I'll kind of hear them say something, and the facade cracks, and I'm like, oh, you're just making stuff up. You don't even, you don't even know why you're saying like this is wrong. And it kind of in my head, I sort of like just like mentally like invalidate anything they say, and I'm like, oh, okay, you're a liar. Why am I arguing with a liar?
This is like when we said that the Ghostbusters reboot was pandering, and somebody said, well, by that logic, Miles Morales is pandering to black people.
Yeah, dude, I remember that comment, and I was like, that's not what I said.
So here's another
You're
example.
lying.
A Democrat politician says he wants to spend more money on a social safety net. His Republican opponent calls him a communist.
Yes.
Kind of what I did there. On the other hand, a man tells his Democrat friend that he's going to vote for the Republican because he thinks they have a better stance on immigration. His friend accuses him of being a racist.
Jokes aside, breaking it down, like you said, it's just easier. It's easier than, rather than in a nuanced fashion, dissecting somebody's argument and matching their points with an equally argumentative, well thought out statement against what they're saying. It's just easier to make up something much more severe, because something much more intense, less nuanced, and one-dimensional is much easier to argue against. You know, you arguing for the existence of some sort of nuancedly structured social safety net for maybe less fortunate citizens in a society, that's a lot harder to argue against than you're a fucking commie.
Right.
Because all I have to do is just be like, yeah, commies are bad. You're a commie, so you're bad. That's that's all I have to say, rather than address every point of your social system like plan.
And it's hard to discuss border politics.
It is. It's difficult to discuss any hot button issue.
Well, if I say I think that the Republicans, they are stricter on the border, and I think they have better policies in that regard in protecting our nation's best interest, it's difficult for you to come up with a counter response and say, well, actually, I'm well informed about border policies, and here's why I think that's incorrect. It's way easier just to say, well, you're racist. You just want to stay secluded and put America first.
and I think that, honestly, I think that a lot of the time it comes down to like a lot of like single issue voters, right? It's so easy to get fired, and like any like main stage like political conversations like this, right? Like, because like what are the big political debates? There is the border, there's abortion, there's like LGBTQ rights, like
crime.
Those are like the big discussions that there is like a lot of division on,
and very little nuance.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like those conversations end up being despite them being the biggest, they end up being the least productive, because it's just a bunch of yelling. Like, for example, I feel very strongly about some of these issues, right? I feel very, very strongly, and I have what some people would consider to be radical opinions on them. But I don't think that I would ever find myself in a position where I would actually be able to have some sort of conversation with maybe somebody who is equally as passionate about me on the opposite end of the spectrum, because I think the more passionate you feel about something, the more fervently that you wish to defend it. And so the more, I think, susceptible you are to sort of succumbing to the temptations of straw manning, because you want to be right. You want your opinions to be validated. You want to feel like you are the one fighting the good fight.
Sure, but if you actually are well informed and have an actual argument to put forth, you shouldn't have to rely on fallacies.
Yeah, well, most people aren't, to be fair.
You should just be able to say, here's why my idea is good, and then you present your idea, and then I realize that my idea is better than yours.
Yeah, and that's not even like an insult saying most people don't. Think about like the deficit, the federal deficit, the budget of our country. I don't know a lot about that, right? And so if somebody came to me, seeking nuanced and intellectual discourse, I wouldn't be able to have that conversation, because I don't know the inner mechanisms of how such a system works. I probably should.
That's something that's kind of lost on people today. Nobody wants to say like, well, I'm not really informed enough to have an opinion on that, because I actually don't know. Because everybody will just say, well, I heard somebody else has an opinion on that, and that's how I feel now. And also, you're a racist communist.
I don't know, man. And I think that's something that I've realized as I've gotten older, that it's, I think, very important to, like, be able to accept that, hey, sometimes you just don't know. Is it important to be educated about these things? Yeah, for sure. But it's important to also recognize that you might not be an expert on this specific socio-political issue. And you don't have to be, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's okay. It's okay to not know.
Even whenever I present an opinion on this show, a lot of times I'll preface it by saying, I may be underinformed on this. And if new information was brought to me, my opinion might change on this.
I think that's just something that, like, a lot of people are very hesitant to do. People are adverse to changing their opinion once presented with new information.
Nobody wants to be a flip-flopper.
Oh yeah, well, also, like, like I said, nobody wants to be wrong, Like, it's like, I would rather double down on this opinion after being proved wrong, because if I change my opinion, then I'm admitting that I was wrong. And so, like, obviously, on paper, it sounds silly. Like, oh, just change your opinion when new information comes to light. But, like, in practice, like, I do understand. Like, I understand how some people might double down on some, dated opinions because they just don't want to be wrong.
Okay, let's move into our next debate.
Let's do it.
For this one, the topic will be, human activity does or does not contribute to climate change.
I mean, if you're referring to human activity as in, like, everyday sort of consumption of materials in terms of driving cars, consuming plastics, and all of that stuff, like, that stuff affects the climate, and I guess those count as activities. I guess driving is an activity.
Mm-hmm.
The exhaust from my car pollutes the atmosphere, which then warms up the atmosphere. The plastic and other long-living waste that I produce goes into landfills that then have similar impacts. I mean, I guess in the most vague terms possible, then yes, because of those things that we consume, produce, and expel on a daily basis, then I guess to some extent human activity as a baseline foundational concept does in fact impact the climate of our Earth.
Well, see, my uncle, he's like really smart. He went to like a really Ivy League college. And he's like a scientist. He's like a biologist or something. I don't know. But he's like really smart. He reads like a ton of books, and he just knows so much. He's right a lot. And I watch him play Jeopardy sometimes. He gets like all the questions right. And he says that humans have no impact on climate change. That the globe is just going to go through these natural cycles of climate change, regardless of what we do. So I don't think that's right.
I feel like that's like an appeal to authority.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Appeal
that's
to
what I thought.
authority.
I was like, yeah.
So this is a fallacy where an argument is presented based solely on the authority, credentials, or expertise of the person making the argument, rather than on the merits of the argument itself.
You know what? I will say this. I don't, in terms of like the heated bad faith arguments that I see on the internet a lot, primarily Twitter. I'm on Twitter a lot. I don't really see this one a lot. I don't see a lot of people citing the opinions of like their talking heads on whichever side of the spectrum they're on. I don't feel like I see this a lot. I feel like it's mostly just insults, as we talked about.
Think about the pandemic and the vaccines.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Here's
a specific example. Joe Rogan told his millions of followers that ivermectin, the horse dewormer drug, was a good cure or treatment for COVID-19.
Yeah. I take that every day. And look at me now. I'm doing great.
And he has a huge, gigantic, loyal fan base. And when he says something like this, people start to get behind him and say, well, Joe Rogan, he's like a smart guy. I listen to his podcast.
Yeah, he's got a huge platform.
Like, why would they give him this big, huge podcast platform if he wasn't a smart guy and didn't know what he's talking about?
Exactly, dude. You know what? I actually have I've gotten COVID 3 times. Maybe maybe that's what I was missing. I should have just been taking some ivermectin.
Maybe so. I mean,
Um,
just because it's a fallacy doesn't mean it's wrong.
but no, you're definitely right. Like now that I think about it, I mean the pandemic was filled with a bunch of like
Right.
for example with what's his name? Is his name Fauci? Is it Fauci or Fauci?
Fauci.
Fauci. I mean a lot of people. And listen, I'm vaccinated. Like I'm very pro-vaccine. I want that to be clear. This is just an example. A lot of people would cite, like Fauci's advice as like that's gospel without really educating themselves on like what was going on. And of course,
He is in an appropriate
uneducated.
position to give that opinion, but still, you
I
are
and,
just
and
basing your opinion off of what somebody else says.
Yeah, exactly. Like I mean, like I think that he's a trustworthy person, but also, look into it yourself.
And on the opposite end, you have, like, this is a kind of a niche out there scientist. And he says that vaccines are bullshit and they can give you autism. And there's this way better cure that's alternative. And, this guy's really smart. He's got a degree in everything.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, with like the whole appeal to authority argument, like obviously it can be made, but also I just think that I think that a little bit of skepticism is healthy. I mean, I think that if you have somebody that is in such a position of power to where their opinion reaches, swaths of people, millions of people in the country, they might be educated on the topic. But I would always just take what they've said and expand upon that in a way. And sometimes people come to the wrong conclusions, such as vaccines cause autism, because I looked into it myself, and it's like, well, but. I do think that just being generally skeptical of authority is healthy. I think that's good. And so appeal to authority just also like come on. Just really? You get all your opinions from Joe Rogan? I'm not even hating on Joe Rogan, but like you get all your opinions from him? Cuz I've heard that man say a lot of different things.
You probably shouldn't get medical advice from Joe Rogan.
Yeah, and I mean now if you want some advice on the way that UFC should be fought, I'd go to Joe Rogan. That man is an expert on you. I mean, that man knows so much about fighting. It's crazy. He's an incredibly well-educated person in that field. And I would say that he is probably one of the most well-educated public figures on the topic. But I'm not going to him for vaccine advice or COVID advice.
So that brings us to the end of our debates.
Oh, no, okay.
But
okay.
I do have a few more fallacies I'd like to present.
All right.
So I can either just read them out straight, or I can give you the example, and then maybe you work backwards and guess which one it is.
I'm down to take one or two more guesses.
Okay. So someone might say, all Star Wars fans hate The Rise of Skywalker. And someone else might say, well, my friend Jeff, he's like a huge Star Wars fan. He's seen all the movies multiple times. He's got a Star Wars tattoo. You should see his collection of action figures. Like, he is the biggest Star Wars fan I know. And, well, he thinks that all the movies are good, including Rise of Skywalker. And the other person might say, well, no true Star Wars fan likes that movie. If he were a true Star Wars fan, he would realize that movie is bad.
Yeah, if you were a true Scotsman.
That's right. The no true Scotsman fallacy. It inaccurately deflects counterexamples to a claim by changing the position or conditions of the original claim to exclude the counterexample.
Mm-hmm.
So
I also see this one a lot.
Right. You bring up a counterpoint that you can point to and say, well, this doesn't match your argument. And they say, no. I was only talking about, like, the real ones.
Yeah, it's like, what? You can't just change your argument.
That's just like moving the goalpost.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Okay, next up.
Okay.
I might make the claim that I can fly. Mel.
Okay, I already know where this is going.
But I don't really feel like proving it. But then again, you also can't prove that I can't fly, so I think we should just both assume that it is true.
Yeah, would you say that... So I can't prove that you can fly.
You can't prove that I can't fly.
Yeah, and you could even maybe say that I have a burden. set upon me
Right.
to prove. Yeah, burden of proof, baby. I love that, dude. Hey, this is a thing, and you're like, oh, is it? What's what sources are you? What source did you find that information? It's like, not my fucking problem. I don't need to educate you.
Yeah, there's no counter source. This is
Yeah, it's
basically
like, what the
how
hell?
religions exist, by the way.
How brave of you to make such a statement.
They say, hey, there's like some kind of invisible deity that controls everything, created the universe. And also, he loves me, but he hates Mel. And I don't really have to prove it. I have this thing called faith. But you can't really disprove that God exists. So, haha, checkmate, atheist.
Yeah, must be true.
Next up, so during the summer months, ice cream sales and shark attacks both rise in tandem. Therefore, the increase in ice cream sales directly leads to an increase in shark attacks.
That's correlation causation.
Yes, and that's when someone incorrectly assumes that because two events or variables occur together or are correlated, one must have caused the other.
I really do appreciate that people bullshit so often in our lives, and they bullshit in so many different ways that we have a bunch of different names and labels for the different types of bullshit. It's so good. It's like, oh, I'm going to make this argument. And you're like, oh, that's bullshit. Class B.
Yeah, we should just
saw
put
that coming from a
numbers
mile
on 'em.
away. Yeah.
This one's 32, okay? If
one.
somebody says this bullshit, 32.
32. Let's call them out for it right there. And we can just move on in our days without staying on this for too long. Like, let's not let this occupy too much of our time. Let's not spend all day on this conversation, which could easily just be solved with, you say this, bad faith, bye.
Well, Mel, that's actually a fallacy in itself.
Oh, what is it? The fucking, what is it? What is it?
The fallacy.
The fallacy?
This is our last one, and this is the mistaken belief that pointing out a logical fallacy in an argument means that the conclusion of that argument is untrue.
Oh, so like, I might actually be ugly and God hates me. Like, even if it hurts my feelings.
Yeah, I mean, I used a fallacy against you, but it doesn't make it untrue. And just because you can point it out to somebody like, your argument was full of fallacies and you misrepresented my point, doesn't necessarily mean that what they said was not true.
I think you're just making it up.
Well, I've got two examples here that will convince you.
I don't know. You don't have any proof.
Someone might say, we should eat more fruits and vegetables because a popular nutritionist said so. And that is an appeal to authority. However, it is entirely true.
Yeah.
So just because you can say, that's appeal to authority, you're bullshit. Well, their argument is still valid. And secondly, removing homosexuality from the DSM's list of mental illnesses will lead to the legalization of same-sex marriage. Now, at the time, that was a slippery slope.
But it happened.
Yes. But slippery
Okay,
slopes do eventually sometimes come true.
Yeah. I can't wait to marry my mic stand. My fucked up, broken mic stand.
You can fix her.
Yeah, it's got personality.
And on that note, this has been Bad Arguments.
Hell yeah.
We will see you next Tuesday on the next episode of The Long Couch. Bye.
Goodbye.